So, Chad, thank you for taking time out of your schedule to talk to me today. Welcome to the show. Introduce yourself to everybody.
Hey, good morning, Andy. I really appreciate it. I'm Chad Brockway. Currently, I am the president of the Intelligence Operations Division for a security company by the name of Edgeworth.
Very cool. So, I mean, that's like a really high level, business and name and that sort of stuff. What led you to the intelligence and cybersecurity fields? How have you gotten here today?
Well, it's a pretty long story. I'll just kind of give you the high level kind of overview of it. I started in the Marine Corps as a military police officer. I actually got selected from the academy to go to a special unit called the Marine One HMX-1 helicopter unit, if you're familiar with it. There, I went into the White House liaison office, which is responsible for doing a lot of like the travel, trip planning, pre-advance. So really started getting involved in intelligence on that side, right? Like figuring out information of interest around areas, around individuals of interest, around safety and security. So that really kind of opened up intelligence for me, at least as a career and an interest path. When I left the Marines, I went over to the DoD where I did cybersecurity efforts for a DoD intelligence agency and transitioned over to more of an intelligence role outside of cybersecurity, and kind of got my feet wet there on the cybersecurity side combined with intelligence. And then had the opportunity to go and I got picked up to go work for the FBI. So in 2004, I transitioned over to the Bureau where I was assigned to the Science and Technology branch there with the FBI. And our main goal with S&T there was to develop new ways and capabilities of getting information, accessing information, collecting information, and then helping the FBI as a whole across the entire Bureau nationwide on conducting kind of next generation solutions to investigative requirements. So I kind of, started melding together the intelligence collection, the cybersecurity collection, emerging, not existing capability kind of development. And it was a very interesting career path. And, the Bureau side of it, I was familiar with collection and cybersecurity risks and practices that were out there and what the bad guys are doing and how they're doing it. What the Bureau enabled me to do was learn how to do it appropriately. What are the
Hmm.
laws and regulations, right? What are the laws that are being broken? How can those, how is that used to build a case? And also in our investigations, how do we ensure that we're legally sound in how we conduct our investigations, how we collect evidence, how that evidence is processed and tracked so that the investigating agent in the field can then use it as a part of their investigation and prosecution.
Very cool. So you have been doing this for quite some time. You have a quite a steep background in doing cybersecurity. Honestly, you think back to 2004. I don't want to believe that that was 20 years ago, but apparently it was. So you've been doing this for like a really long time. You have seen like the rise of social media and all of that. You know, you and I are both dads. Kind of walk us through like what are the hot social media apps right now? What is it that we as parents really need to be looking out for when it comes to these particular, or excuse me, what are the hot apps right now? What should we know? We'll start there.
Yeah, so this is actually a trick question, a little bit, only because I get it from parents a lot, right? What should I be watching? What should I be monitoring? And the answer is, I can't tell you because I don't know your kids and I don't know their social circles, right?
I like that. I like that. Yeah.
The but I don't just leave it at that. I help the parents figure it out for themselves, right? So obviously everybody knows all the top social apps that kids are on, right? But in helping to kind of explain this to parents, like I always ask parents, who here has Facebook? 99% of them has Facebook. How many of their kids do you think have Facebook? Like less than 10%, right? Because Facebook is an adult app. Same with
Right.
LinkedIn. Twitter now X has largely transitioned to an adult community. And so the real challenge is identifying the social media apps that we are not aware of. So it's not what are the huge ones that we're aware of and we all know and that parents, should be monitoring. It's what are the social media and communication platforms that kids are using that we don't know about, right? And to the example I just provided, as soon as the adults get on a social media platform, the kids are gone and they're on to the next thing that the adults don't know about, right? And it's all about due diligence and self-information on behalf of the parents. You've got to take the time to go out and become self-aware because you know your kid better than me or any law enforcement officer or agent out there, right? So what are your kids' interests? What are they looking at? What are they engaged in? Are they engaged in art? Are they engaged in music? Are they engaged in cars? Man, Google is the best intelligence resource for all out kind of open source intelligence that exists today. And it really takes a parent 5 to 10 minutes to become subject matter experts in what their kids possibly care about and where they're going to discuss these things, right? So, in an example is a parent can go online and say, social media platforms for art discussion or art development or art exchange. And they're going to come up with all of these social media platforms specifically designated to those genres, right? Or a parent can just go on and say, what are the social media platforms a parent should be aware of? Great returns are going to come up. And they can go and look at those and they can investigate them. And, they can then take that back. They can look at their child's phone and be like, all right, are any of these apps installed on my child's phone? Is this what I need to be aware of? Is this what they're curious about? Talk to their kids about it. Find out, hey, what are you using? Like, you're really into art, you're really into cars. Where do you go to have these conversations? Kids are already hesitant, to talk to us about anything. They're really hesitant to share information with us. Number one, and I mean, all parent and kid kind of relationships go through this. I don't know about you, Andy, but like when I was raising my daughter, dad didn't know anything about anything, right? Her friend group was like, forget the 40 years I spent on this planet, right? Her friend group were the subject matter experts on everything, right? And so having those conversations is hard, and I get it, but you always do have to have those conversations and trying to identify where your children are online, what they're doing, and who they're engaging with. And again, that simple 10-15 minute, online investigation, I think will help provide parents a lot of information and insight into what they should be looking for, or at least be aware of.
I really, really like your answer. And because, I tell people, I talk a lot about home security and I will say, hey, there's no one solution that's going to work across the board. You have to customize it for your family and for your home, that sort of thing. But one question that I get a lot, I'm sure you get this one a lot. I think I know where you're going to go with this, but is there an appropriate age where it becomes okay for a child to get a social media account? What's your take on that?
This is one of the most important points that I make during all my lectures with kids and parents is, every parent has to make that decision for themselves based on their child's mentality, based on their maturity, based on their friend groups. But I tell parents this all the time. If your child's peers are utilizing social media, your child is utilizing social media. They're creating apps, they're creating accounts, they're downloading on other kids' phones. They are running social media accounts on their friends' devices so that they can have access to and engage at social media. So effectively, all you're doing is preventing your knowledge and capability for awareness by keeping them off of that app and that social media platform. And I mean, no fourth grader out there should be on Instagram, right? So there's obviously a logical kind of response to this question. But if your child's peers are on social media, there is a high probability that they are on social media. And, number one, I have like top 3 takeaways that I share with parents and kids in all my lectures I do. And this is one of them. There is no such thing as prevention. There's only awareness and education.
Hmm.
Your children are going to be on social media. They are going to be engaging with the world in whole. You cannot stop. The best thing you can do as a parent is talk to them about what the risks are, what they may or may not see. This includes adult content, having the conversation of adult content. And, I can share some stories that I've had with families around adult content and young exposure via social media and public engagement platforms. But making it clear with your kids, like, what your expectations are for when they are engaging online, the possibility of content that they're going to see, what they should do and know about it. And in the event something happens, what the expectation of that child should do is going to be. Because, like I said, kids are already hesitant to engage with us, to share information, to talk to us. They're even more so hesitant. Number one reason is because they're afraid of losing access. They are afraid mom and dad
Mhm.
are going to freak out and they're going to take away devices, they're going to take away accounts, and they're going to take away access, right? And I do like throwback terminology with all of my parents. Like I have throwback terminology for everything, but you know, when social media is different for kids than it is for us.
Yeah.
Our kids have inherently grown up with social media as a part of who they are in their life, right? And so the difference between us leading social media and your child leading social media, the psychological impact is significantly different. And it's very important for parents to understand that a child losing access to their social media and their social media accounts is related to extracting them from their social circle, the ability to engage with their peers, their ability to feel that they are informed with their peers, right? And if you think about it, like when we were growing up, you know, and the mixtape, right? Like we made our own mixtapes. It was all the music that we loved and that we felt like personified who we were as an individual, right? And we would go around with in our cars or with our music boxes, and we would play that same song over and over and over because we wanted everybody to hear, man, this is who I am. This is what's important to me. That's the same with social media for our kids. And it's very addictive in that way. And it's creatively addictive. And every social media platform out there knows that it's addictive. But this is the expression of who your child is, just like that those mixtapes were to us. But it's not just social media, right? It's also the hardware. It's the cell phones. You know, they can bling them out and put cases on it and put ringtones and sounds and music and photos and backgrounds. And this is an example of who I am. And when I pull this out, this is what my peers see and think about me, right? And our parents need to be aware of our children are afraid that when they lose those things, they're losing a piece of their identity as well as an access to their peer network. I'm not saying that if your child is doing things that they shouldn't be doing, that you remove those accesses or restrict them from them. What I am saying is just be aware of it shouldn't be the everyday kind of disciplinary thing because it is very addictive and it is very different to them.
Yeah. Yeah, man, there's a lot of good stuff in that to unpack. So you're telling us that, we may, tell our kids that, hey, you can't have this app on your phone, but they'll get to it somewhere. They will do something somewhere. Um, Given that that is the case, and the education and having a conversation with your kids is so important, what information do we need to tell them about what they should and should not share on social media?
Well, yeah, also very important, right? And this becomes part of the, when we do these lectures, we do the student lectures first. So we go into the school, we speak to the school in whole, we have terminal learning objectives, all these points to make students aware. Before that, the night before that, we do the parent lecture, which is here's everything your kid is going to hear the next day at school. So when they come home, you are ready to have the electronic device social media conversation, right? And so kind of setting those parents up to have that conversation. And this is a very important conversation for parents to be ready for. And it's also a very important conversation for them to have. I completely understand, the dynamic, sometimes the confrontation that exists, sometimes the unwillingness to have these conversations. But this is one of the most important conversations that parents can have with their kids. And I tell parents, it's all about that point of opportunity to have those conversations. And with my daughter, it was always driving to school. It was windows up, radio off, devices down. You've got nowhere to go and no distractions. We're going to talk about this, right? And
Yeah.
and so that was kind of my staged environment to have those conversations. So when our parents are preparing, to talk about online social media safety, how kids are engaging online, what they're saying. It's so important for children to understand the value of their information.
Mm,
Currently in the position I have now and the role that I provide to my clients out there across the world is understanding the value of your information and what people are doing with it. So information like your name, your address, your date of birth, your social security number, your phone number, essentially anything that anybody can use to reach out and contact you directly or reach out and find and physically have contact with you, right? All of
mhm.
this information is very important. This also includes where you go to school, right? We work with schools to ensure that they are minimizing their public exposure on their students and their staff and all of this information. Teach your kids about good online safety, right? And that, again, this comes down to personal judgment, but when it comes to having accounts online, this goes against the usage in terms of all the social media platforms that are out there. But persona accounts, fake information. Don't put your real name, date of birth, email address. Have a backup garbage email address. Don't provide your phone number. All of these things are really important for parents to understand because individuals who specifically target children, there's only a few things that they're really interested, right? And
Right.
one is direct exploitation of those kids, right? Which we all know what that means.
Mhm.
It's the ability to compromise those kids via blackmail or via extortion, right? And we've had several cases of that over the past couple of years. And then it's identity theft. And I always ask the parents, when was the last time you checked your kid's credit score? And out of all of them, very few. Like I get one or two out of hundreds of parents who will say, "Oh yeah, we stay on top of it regularly."
Mhm.
Your child's credit score is one of the best ways to monitor for child identity theft, right? I've had so many instances of parents talking about, when is the first time like your kid's credit score gets run? It's when they apply for a car loan. It's when they apply to student loans. It's when they apply to get an apartment. And then they found out that they're hundreds of thousands of dollars in debts, or they've got 15 maxed out credit cards. Because at some point, somewhere, somebody online said, "Wow, you look really old. How old are you? Oh, you're 13? Man, when's your birthday? That's crazy, man. Does everybody around you look your age? Where do you live?" Right? And just those inquisitive questions that kids just have no idea about what they're giving out there. And then they're taking that information and then they're taking out loans and I mean, buying homes and cars and credit cards. And I mean, it's happening all the time. So, teaching your children the value of the information, what it can be used for, how it can be used against them, and what to do to kind of put up preventative measures and awareness. Again, that kind of comes in the discussion of what are expectations of you as you engage online. You will not stop the world from engaging with your child.
Right.
The only thing you can do is educate your child on how to engage with the world.
Man, I like that. Like, I feel like that just sums up our whole conversation right there. That's awesome. Talking about your kid's credit, I actually froze my son's credit a couple years ago, just kind of like as this extra step. He's 12. I think I froze it when he was 10. I was like, we're just going to do this. And then earlier this year, I got a letter from my bank saying that their accounts had been hacked and his information, like name, address, social security number, that sort of stuff, was accessed. And I was like, oh, like one that made me angry. But here, my kid at age 11 at this point has been involved in his first known data breach, that sort of thing. So it was just like, man, wow. So like, I hate to say it, we're also, I'm sure you're very aware of like the national public data breach and all that sort of stuff. This is just kind of the world that we're living in now, right?
You're exactly right. And so, yeah, that these, data breaches, they usually end up on the dark web, right? Which is where the national public data breach just end up and was exposed a couple months ago. And this is an extreme blanket statement that isn't necessarily factual, but we should consider it factual and live our lives by it. Nowhere is safe from being hacked. from having information in data breach. It doesn't matter if it's a bank, banks get hacked all the time, your gym gets hacked all the time, social media platforms get hacked all the time. All of your information is persistently eligible for discovery, extraction, and provision somewhere for some reason, right? And usually this takes place for one or two reasons, right? So when we see these large scale data breaches where somebody hacks a company, a corporation, a business, something to that effect, and they're stealing thousands to hundreds of thousands to millions of client information articles at a single time, right? These, exactly like you just said, these are your names, date of birth, social security numbers, addresses, phone numbers, all of these kind of things, they're being grabbed. And then they usually take them to the dark web. And it usually takes place in one of two ways. It's either a, hey, look what I did in the cyber hacking communities. Look what I was able to do. Here it is for whoever wants it, which is the case of the most recent data breach. Or it's the, I've just gained access to all of this information, user accounts, passwords, social security numbers, those kind of things, dates of birth, and I'm selling it. And so usually what they'll do is they'll put the name. So, you'll see a lot of celebrities and, high net worth individuals on there, which is our current client base that we work for. And people will go through and search for celebrity names and high net worth individual and clients. And then they will, pay $15 to get their username and their password to their email address or to their device or their phone. And then next thing you see is, data dumps of their personal cell phones and their personal email accounts. And that's how that transpires. And there's unfortunately absolutely nothing you can do about it, because when it does come to cybersecurity, it is a very in the moment, almost reactive service that you can have, right? It's really hard to be proactive because we don't know what's coming out tomorrow. We don't know what that next guy is going to develop and launch to exploit data and hack new environments until he develops it and runs it. And then we got to find it. And then we got to go see how he did it. And then we have to create a way to prevent it in the future, right? So it's one of those things. Every parent out there for their families should have the plan of, all of my information is out there. Every single thing I say and do online, somebody else has access to. And that's one of my number 2 points of my, you must take away from this. All of your information is out there. Your kids need to understand every photo, every email, every text message, every conversation, every post that they make, somebody else has access to. And in consideration of that, what would you do if somebody other than the intended were to see this information? And this is part of the lecture I have with the kids, right? Think about if your grandparents, if your parents, if your family, if your friends, if your coworkers, if every student at this school were to see every photo, text, post that you make was available to them, how would that impact you? And that's part of educating the kids to be aware of what they're saying, how they're saying it, and helping them to understand there is a difference between intent and perception. What are you saying and how are you saying it? And regardless of what you intend to say and how you intend to say it, what is somebody on the other end going to look at that and think and feel without being able to have the conversation and understand what you're really saying, right? So all of that kind of plays into it, on the information that's out there, how it gets out there, and what we can do about it. When it's on the dark web, there's nothing you can do about it but be aware. So set up accounts, Equifax, all of your credit monitoring accounts, set them up on your kids. It's very important. Like you said, Andy, like you put a credit freeze on your kid, that's great. That's going to prevent a lot of possible incidents in the future. But when it comes to the hacks and the data breaches, you've already got to treat it like it's out there. There's no such thing as prevention. There's only such thing as, what do I do in the event that this had already happened?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of great takeaways there. And it's really, you and I didn't grow up with an internet like this, so we don't understand how this works. So I feel like it's kind of slipped away from guys like you and me. Like, man, whoa, what happened here? The internet used to be, I just was wanting to check the weather and sports scores, and now artificial intelligence is telling me to put how to cook eggs and all sorts of stuffs like that. So yeah, it's just gotten kind of nuts. So in going back to social media, you talked about predators and how they can kind of talk to kids about, where they are and things like that. What are some of the other red flags that parents need to be aware of to tell their children about if you see something like this online, if somebody asks you this type of question, what is it that needs to trigger that? Oh, wait, I need to go talk to mom and dad about this. What are those red flags that we need to see?
Yeah, I mean, basically, kids are very smart, right? They're the people who target our kids online are usually very smart. And here comes another throwback kind of comparison. When we were growing up, it was stay away from the white van with free puppies and free candy written on the side, right? And don't talk to strangers in the mall. Well, the part about that is we had to leave our homes to even risk that engagement of danger, right? Now our kids don't even have to leave the house. And the world in full has access to our kids sitting in their bedroom 24/7 as long as they're on those devices, right?
Mhm.
And these people who are targeting the kids, they're really good at what they do. They know exactly what to say. They condition our kids. They use, delineating terminology to, instead of talking directly about sex, they talk about, very rough comparisons of sex. Or, instead of talking about age, like, you know, I'm a 47-year-old man talking to a 12-year-old. I'm not going to throw that up there because that kid's going to see that that's a red flag. And I know this sounds like, and I share this in the schools as a real life example of, an FBI investigation of an individual who was targeting a child. But this guy was talking to a child and the kid was like, "Oh, how old are you?" And he's like, "It doesn't matter how old I am. Uh, you know, I'm just an asparagus and you're a sprout, but we're all in the same field, right?" And every child who hears that when I do my lectures, like, that's the stupidest thing I ever heard. If somebody said that to me online, I would be like, I'm not talking to this guy, but it worked. And that kid continued engaging, right? When I talk to the kids and I tell them, everybody knows when you get that kind of this doesn't feel right. Like maybe you're out somewhere and like the hair on the back of your neck stands up and you get that inherent, you get those feelings for a reason. And we need to tell our kids if you feel that way, there's a reason that you're feeling that way. Don't worry about hurting feelings. Don't worry about what people are going to say because a lot of times there's peer interjection here where
Mhm.
they're engaging with another friend or a group of friends in a community. That whole group of friends is engaging with an individual or another group who's engaging with them. That child always has the FOMO. Like, if I leave and disengage because I know this isn't right, I'm going to miss out. My friends are going to think I'm lame, or, I'm going to lose access to this discussion. All of these things affect how your child responds to these situations. But it's more important to help our kids understand that when you get those feelings and you start feeling like this is going further than it should, or I don't even understand, if your kids are in a situation that they don't understand even what's being talked about, that's a red flag. It's time to back out. And I also, I tell students and parents, like, don't try and talk to these individuals. Don't try. And like boys, teenage boys are the worst on this. Like, they're like, "Oh, I remember this lecture with this FBI guy at my school and I'm going to find out who this guy is and I'm going to report him." Like, don't, man. They're smart and they're way smarter than me and they're way smarter than parents and they're way smarter than kids. And they're going to see it coming a mile away. And most likely, the only thing you're going to do is shut down the information feed that law enforcement could use to gain more information. The best thing a parent can do if their child feels like something is happening and something is going on, write it down on a physical piece of paper. What platform was it? The time and date it took place? What was the username? If you can, get screen grabs of the conversation that was taking place, any and all information that was divulged. Try and record it, get it down, engage law enforcement, let them do the investigation, right? And so that's kind of the best thing. I will also add, when looking for indicators, children will always indicate if something wrong or bad has transpired in their physical, emotional, and verbal context. And the example that I give for parents is if your kid loves ice skating and they go ice skating or roller skating, or they go to the soccer field every Friday just to play with friends, and they're so into it, and then one day they're not, and they don't want anything to do with it, and they don't want to talk about it, something has happened to cause that change in interest. And it's the same online. If your child is passionate about making cooking videos, sharing music, talking about art, very active in cars and all of these things online, and they talk to you about it and they tell you and they show you every day, and then one day they're not, something has happened to cause that change in your child's behavior towards something that they're very passionate about. Watch for those physical, real life indicators that something has happened, and you've got to have those conversations with your kids. We all hear the pick your battles, right? Pick your battles. This is a battle to pick and fight to the max every single time, because the only one who's going to lose if you don't is your kids. That is guaranteed. I know we've all had those streaming arguments that we don't understand, that we're ruining their lives, and the slam doors and all that. Man, put that aside for this, push through it, and continue to engage until you figure out what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome, man. A lot of people think that this is only a digital problem, and he just brought it home that this is a very physical, a very, a very emotional thing. I know that kids today, they'll have their public facing Instagram account, but then they'll have their private Instagram account. So they'll have two, and they'll let mom and dad follow them on that forward facing one. So as we wrap up here, how can I, as a parent, look for signs that maybe my kid does have a secret account that they're using?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And there's multiple ways to answer this. And my third takeaway from all of my lectures is to the parents and students: nobody is looking out for you online. Nobody. The social media platforms aren't doing it because, and this is Chad's personal opinion, they will go out there and they'll kind of virtue signal that they're protecting your kid's information and giving your child the ability to, hide their photos and their conversations from general public access, which is a whole other side of that, which we can go into at another time if you want. But nobody is looking out for our kids online. It is up to us and our family and our kids specifically to look out for themselves and each other. And, these social media platforms, I just watched an interview on Fox News earlier this week where one of the major social media platforms came out and like, we're working to eliminate, young access to adult content on social media. And, we're having them put in their date of birth and all this. And, I'm just sitting here, I'm like, this is like the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard, because yeah, kids will go on, they'll create an account and they'll put in all this fake information. And the news host actually asked, like, okay, well, what about fake accounts when they don't put in their, real information? And the company representative responded like, well, we're going to validate it. And that's where that conversation stopped. Okay, great. How are you validating it? What are you doing to validate who these individuals are? I mean, just like our kids are doing it, the people who are targeting our kids are doing the same thing. They're creating fake, non-traceable accounts. And the social media platforms have made this so easy to do so that there is no way to prevent your kids from having alternative persona accounts in social media. The social media platforms cannot do it. You cannot do it, right? And you can't do it to a full extent. There are always things you can do, which are, parent monitoring software on devices. Super important, right? I tell every single parent that I ever have a lecture with, you should be monitoring your children's electronic devices and access to the internet 24/7. If they are under the age of 18 and you pay for the device and the service, and we have now seen this coming forward more and more predominantly in the legal court, the parents are being held just as accountable as the kids, because they are facilitating the access, they are allowing the communication, and they are not doing their parental requirement of effectively monitoring what their kids are saying and doing online. There was a case a couple of years ago where a young girl in Florida, she committed suicide because she was being bullied so bad by two other girls. Not only were those two other girls charged, their parents were charged as well because they were complicit in the fact that they were enabling their kids to do this and not taking up the responsibility of effectively being aware of what their kids were doing with this access that they were providing to them. And the next question I always get is, okay, great. What software should we download on our phones right now? Every parent in the lectures are holding out their phone, like ready to download it, right? And I give them the same answer as I give them about other stuff. I can't tell you what software you should download on your phones and your devices because I don't know your child. I don't know their devices. Devices vary from model type to model type, from manufacturer to manufacturer. There are hundreds of great parental monitoring software tools out there that parents can use. And these will help identify if your kid is creating and logging in to other profiles and apps and tools that you're unaware of. The best thing, and again, I always relate this to a story. When I was in the Bureau, I served with a guy, and like one summer, he became obsessed with he's going to become the grill master. And he spent hours of researching grills, charcoal, fire, pellet, nuclear thermal, like you name it. This dude can tell you anything and everything about grills, right? And he became a subject matter expert in heat dissipation and like everything, right? Like it was crazy, like anything you wanted to know. And then I talked to parents about, okay, what do you know about your child's devices? I don't know, they've got an iPhone, 10 or 12 or 13. Okay, great. What are you monitoring on that iPhone with? Nothing. Like I didn't know that was an option. Google it, man. Go out and be like, parental monitoring software for iPhone 14, for Google Pixel 8 Pro, whatever it happens to be. This is a multi-million-dollar industry now for software companies to develop parental monitoring software that can be installed on your child's devices. And kind of to the point you made earlier, right? We didn't inherently grow up with this access and this technology, and our kids will fundamentally understand it more than we ever will, right? No matter. So I have a team of intelligence analysts, and they are all young, and they're all very young for a reason, because even they understand the arena in which we are performing our services better than I do, because they've grown up with it inherently, right? The same with your kids. And these software development companies, they know and they understand that parents may not be technologically savvy. They know and understand that, if we're selling software that they have to install and set up and do all these things, they're not going to be able to do it. So they made it super easy. Just go online, Google your child's phone, parental monitoring software. Find some really good ones and then do your due diligence on those vendors. Go out and Google, user reviews of, and put the tool name, user reviews of, and, the company that makes it. What are the vulnerabilities of my child's iPhone 12 or 13? What should every parent know about how a kid is using iPhone 12 and 13? This educational process can take place so fast. And these companies who are developing this information, these software tools, they know that parents are not necessarily technologically savvy, and they make it super simple. The very first parental monitoring software that I ever used, it was plug in your iPhone to the laptop, go ahead and do the installation. And then on the laptop, it says, okay, what do you want to know? Do you want emails, text messages, website traffic, all of these different things that your child could be doing? You get to select what you care about. And then you get to pick how frequently it gets emailed to you. You don't even ever have to go back into that phone, and it runs in the background. Your child has no idea that it's taken place on their devices. But, also be smart about it, right? Like my first setting was, I want to know every 15 minutes. And when I woke up the next morning, I had like thousands of emails of web tracking and text messages and apps that were clicking and accounts that were created, all of those things. Find a good parameter of what you think you need to know about and what you care about. Find a good way to monitor it. Find a good software solution. They're very easy to use and very easy for parents to understand. The last thing that I'll leave kind of parents with when it comes to, not only do parents have the right, but they have the responsibility to monitor, parents have the responsibility to do their due diligence and find out a good monitoring solution for them. I believe every parent should have the conversation with their child that mom and dad see everything. The condition of having this device is that mom and dad see everything, take it or leave it. They're going to take it 10 out of 10 times because, as we talked about, this is their social media circle, their social media access, right? So they will take it 10 out of 10 times and make it a condition of them having that device that mom and dad are going to see everything. And the reason for that is eventually you're going to see something that you have to have a conversation about. And it no longer becomes part of the, you're spying on me. How could you do this? You're invading my privacy, because the awareness is already there. And now you're having a conversation about the issue and what you saw and how we're going to remedy it, and not the invasion of privacy and mom and dad are spying on me conversation. So I believe every parent, as a condition of them giving access to that device, should have the condition that mom and dad see everything.
Absolutely, man. I think that is fantastic. Yeah, having that conversation, being proactive, setting up, what the expectations are, that's a fantastic way to go. So, Chad, I appreciate everything that you have talked about today. And what if people want to know more, and I'm sure they are, where can they find out more about you?
Yeah, so they can go to www.edgeworthsecurity.com. You can go to the intelligence services section of that website to kind of look out what we're doing from the intelligence side. We can also, book appointments to come and speak to parents and students, to churches, to businesses and corporations. That's usually the best way to kind of get access to that and then kind of set up that educational platform.
That is awesome, Chad, man. I appreciate what you're doing, man. God bless you.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. I really appreciate your time and good luck, man.